Chapter 9. Everything is all set. Friday night rolls around and I'm waiting for people to arrive. I didn't have to wait very long. The doorbell rings and I saunter over to the door like I own the place. I grab the door handle and open the door, and to my surprise, it's Clarice. Clarice, I thought you were coming with Sarah. I was a bit shocked to see her alone. Oh, I was, but Bo and I had a pretty bad fight and I had to get out of there. He said he was going to kill me. I know he didn't mean it. He just gets mad and says things he doesn't mean. I wanted so bad to jump all over that statement, but I didn't. Come in, Clarice. As we were walking to the kitchen, I couldn't help myself. I don't know, Clarice, there's something not right about that guy. Hey, she says, let's talk about something else. I came here tonight to have fun. Hey, is Rave here yet? No, he's not here yet. I didn't know you two knew each other. Oh, well, we don't really. I just kind of know him. Clarice, would you like something to drink? Sure, I'll have a beer. I grab one out of the bucket and crack it open and hand it to Clarice. She starts drinking her beer and I pour myself one and jump into all sorts of senseless conversation. You know, like you do when you don't really know someone and you're making small talk because you feel uncomfortable. I wonder where Sarah is and the others are. Thank God, I think to myself, someone else is here. Clarice, I'll be right back. I have to answer the door. Clarice responds, no problem. I walk to the front door and open the door. No one's there. I poke my head outside of the door and look around, and still no one. I close the door and start walking back to the kitchen. I yell out, I guess it was no one. Clarice doesn't offer any response. It's getting a little chilly out, and the curtain to the sliding glass door in the living room is blowing from the wind, so I walk over to close and lock the door before I go back into the kitchen. I turn the lock and loudly say, I wonder where everyone is. They're probably being fashionably late. I scrunch my nose because that even felt stupid for me to say. Clarice doesn't answer. I guess she can't hear me. I walk back into the kitchen and push open the swinging door. I look around the kitchen and I don't see her. Our kitchen has two entrances and a sliding glass door with a big counter area in the middle. Maybe Clarice went to the bathroom. I walk back out of the kitchen and around to the bathroom, but the bathroom door is hanging wide open. Clarice, where are you? I walk around to the other door to the kitchen and push on the door, but the door only pushes in about 4 inches and stops. I push again, but it's no use. I can feel that something's blocking it. Strange, I think to myself. I walk around the other door and walk into the kitchen. I look over the counter in the middle of the kitchen, and quickly I realize that Clarice is face down on the floor. Oh my God, I yell out. She must be drunk or something. I hurry around the counter to Clarice. As I bend down, I look closer, and everything immediately shifts to slow motion because there's definitely blood. But it appears to be coming from the back of her head, and it's on the floor. I start flashing the possibilities through my head. She must have hit her head during the fall. Clarice, wake up! I start shaking her a bit, attempting to get some sort of response, but nothing. I have taken basic first aid, but I was never very good at taking someone's pulse. So I roll Clarice over on her back, and I put my ear down by her mouth to listen for some breathing. I hear nothing. Suddenly, Clarice lets out a ghostly exhalation of pent-up air. I jump back as the blast startles the hell out of me. I look down at her chest and realize she's not breathing. I am stuck between a panic and knowing what to do. I'm torn between helping and what if they think I had something to do with this. Finally, I start CPR as much as I can remember. 2 breaths and 30 pushes. Each breath into Clarice's mouth fills her chest and exits with a horrible wheeze. I can hear the crackling of bones in her chest as I push, trying to revive her. I look at her for any sign of life, but her eyes are absolutely lifeless. I struggle in my head with whether to answer the door or not. Again, a bang on the door. The knocking is so aggressive that it's warning my attention as well. The loud banging snaps me right out of the moment and into another. I race to the front door. It has to be Chev or someone that can help. I grab the handle and yank the door open. Paige! Where the hell's Clarice? It's Mathers. I am so stunned that I don't even respond. I just stare. Paige, he yells again. Where is Clarice? I found out she was coming over here for some little party that you were having with Sarah and your idiot friends. I need to talk to her right now. I don't know, Mathers. She hasn't shown up yet, I blurted out. Mathers, I don't have time for you right now, as I started trying to close the front door. Mathers pushes back on the door. Get the hell off my property before I call the cops on you. Mathers blasts back. Paige, if I find out she's here, you're gonna pay big time. I bellowed back. Whatever, as I was slamming the door in Mathers' face. I turned the deadbolt and raced back to the kitchen. Clarice was still on her back, but she was much paler, looking as if the blood had started to settle to the floor in her body. As I looked at Clarice, a sick, warm feeling rushed through my body. At that moment, I knew she was dead. I also knew immediately that this did not look good for me. Out of fear and the realization of what had happened, I took a few steps back and turned my head to the side, looking out of the corner of my eye at Clarice. I've never seen a dead person, let alone been in a room by myself with one. I immediately started thinking about what I was going to do and say, but none of my thoughts made sense at this point. The police would never believe that I had no idea about how this happened, or that I didn't hear a thing. How could this happen? The worst part of all this was, I really had no idea how this happened. I started looking for where Clarice might have hit her head, and I could see no evidence of anything that could have caused this. I nervously leaned Clarice up and looked at the back of her head, where the bleeding was coming from. Clarice's head slumped forward and easily jostled from side to side as I tried to get a better look at the fatal wound. I don't know why, but I expected a line or a mark that would show she hit her head on the counter or something, so I could match the impact up with the kitchen. I can only find a circular puncture mark in the center of the back of her head. As I look at Clarice, the sweat from my forehead dripped on her and on the floor. I tried to wipe my sweat off the floor and also off Clarice, realizing that I was just making things worse by leaving evidence. What the hell has happened? I thought. I can't remember ever being this scared and confused. After I laid Clarice back on the floor, I reached down and pinched myself on the arm, but I was still awake. As I took my hand off of my arm, I had a blood-stained pinch mark on my forearm. I immediately tried to wipe the blood off, but it just smeared all the more. I looked down at my blood-covered hands and felt woozy. I knew I had to tell someone, but I also felt like I needed to know some more answers because something didn't feel right. I knew it was wrong, but I was torn about what I should do. The doorbell rang. I instantly realized that I forgot that people were coming over. Oh my God. Out of panic, I grabbed Clarice's arm and tried to move her to a different part of the room, but I quickly realized I was spreading the blood on the floor, and I could never clean it up in time. She felt cold, and she was heavy. I could hardly move her. I stood up straight and then paced back and forth a bit, thinking about whether to answer the door. The doorbell rang repeatedly. I stepped over to the sink and began rinsing my hands quickly. Once my hands were clean looking, I made my way toward the front door. I listened for any talking outside or if it was Mathers had come back for some more. I figured that I'd be careful, so instead of answering the door, I said, "Who is it?" "It's Rave, let me in." "Rave?" I don't know why, but Rave felt safe. I grabbed the handle and slowly pulled the door open. I looked around for anyone else and quickly said, "Who else is with you?" Rave answered, "No one," with a puzzled look on his face. I grabbed his wrist and pulled him inside, locking the door behind us. "Whoa! What's up, Ellis? Where is everyone else?" Nervously, I responded, only Clarice is here." Rave smiled and yelled out, "Hey, Clarice, what's happening?" I said quietly, "I don't think she can hear you." Rave looked at me with a funny look. Rave responded, "Why is that?" I mumbled, "Because she's dead." Rave laughed. "Whatever, Ellis. Hey, Clarice!" I said a bit louder with a more serious tone, "Rave, she's dead." "She's really dead?" Rave's eyes get big. "What do you mean she's dead?" Rave almost had tears in his eyes. I looked down at the floor and I'm not sure. I left the room and when I came back, she was dead. I tried to help her, as tears welled up in my eyes. All right, Rafe said, pushing his hands out as if he was trying to calm me down. I think he could tell I was a little messed up about this, but dudes rarely shared real emotion at 17 and 18 years old that felt remotely comfortable. Ellis, where is Clarice? She's in the kitchen, I responded. Rafe started walking towards the kitchen, and I slowly followed. Rafe, I don't think you should really see this. Rafe pushed open the kitchen door and walked over to Clarice. Clarice, wake up, Rafe commanded. Rafe reached down and put 2 fingers on her neck and paused. Yep, he said. She is deader than a doornail. Ellis, who have you told about this? I mean, this really looks bad for you. I know, I said. Rafe turned and looked me straight in the eyes. You know you can tell no one about this. I swallowed hard. I feel like I have to tell someone. Rafe with a sharper tone. You can tell no one. Ellis, we have to do something with Clarice until we can figure out what has happened. Like what, Rafe? Well, we have to hide her body. I know just the place. We will hide her in the Quicksilver mines in the hills. They're abandoned. Nobody goes up there anymore, Ellis. Rafe, I don't know. This just doesn't feel right. Ellis, would you rather go to prison instead for murder? Hell no, I wouldn't, Rafe. But I didn't do this. Well then, did you have another plan? I just stared at Rafe and said nothing. That's what I thought, Ellis. Now go and get a blanket so we can put Clarice in it when we move her to your parents' station wagon. I guess I wasn't moving fast enough, Rafe barked out. Get a move on, Ellis! Rafe gave orders like he had a vengeful tone to his voice, and he was so much more emotionally upset than I thought he might be. I ran to the hall closet and looked for the blanket that would be missed the least. I thought, oh my God, I'm starting to think like a murderer. I grabbed the blanket and returned to the kitchen. Rafe was kneeling over Clarice when I walked in, and I thought that he was talking to her and had tears in his eyes, which is just a little too weird, so I dismissed it. Rafe looked up. When I roll Clarice up, lay the blanket on the floor next to her. Wow, she's heavy, Rafe declared as he pulled her on her side. I didn't respond. All right, Rafe said. Get over here, let's put the blanket under her. I grabbed her arms and Rafe took her legs, and we wiggled her onto the blanket. Ellis, get the keys to the station wagon and back it into the garage. I took the keys off the hook and headed out to the garage. I jumped in the car and backed the car out. I was pretty nervous, so I had trouble backing the car in. I was always too close to one side or the other of the garage entrance. Finally, I backed it in, and I jumped out of the car, heading back into the kitchen. Rafe immediately instructed me to grab the 2 corners of the blanket on her head side, and he grabbed the corners by her feet. Ellis, on the count of 3, lift, and we'll bring Clarice out to the back of the car. 1, 2, 3, lift! I couldn't believe how heavy she was. Rafe and I duck waddled all the way to the garage with Clarice rocking back and forth until we could hold no more and set her down behind the car. It was strange that this was starting to feel like the right thing to do. I guess I was talking myself into it because it felt better than prison. I reached over and opened the back of the station wagon. Again, we did the 1, 2, 3 lift sequence and put Clarice on the tailgate of the car and then pushed her into the back. She was mostly uncovered by the blanket, so I climbed in on my hands and knees and arranged the blanket so she could be as hidden as much as possible. As I climbed out of the back of the car, it dawned on me that no one else had shown up to the party. Hey, Rafe, what do you think happened to everyone else? Who knows? You know people can be flaky. But it's not like Chev to not show up, and I'm worried that Sarah didn't make it either. Hey, worry about that later. Let's get going, Rafe said. We don't want to get caught doing this. All right, I replied. We both jumped in the car, and I drove toward the middle school to the path that leads up to the Quicksilver mine area. We passed the school and came to the gate, which was locked. Hey, Rafe, how are we going to get through the gate? It's locked. Easy. Drive the car up until it's touching the gate and slowly roll forward until you snap the lock. I did just that, and it was as if Rave had done this 100 times. I stopped after driving through, and Rave jumped out and closed the gate so it didn't raise any suspicion. Drove up the 2-track dirt road about 2 miles before we started to see the first mines. It was creepy looking at the all boarded up cave-like entrances. Rave instructed me to keep driving, and he would tell me when to stop. It was almost like he had done this before. We drove about a half mile, and Rave said, "There! That's a good one." I looked at the mine he chose, and it was completely boarded up at the opening. "Hey, Rave, what about that one next to it? It's not as boarded." No, Ellis, I think this one is better. Let's go with this one." "All right, I just thought it would be easier to get into." "Ellis, back the car up in front of the mine so we can unload Clarice." I put the car in reverse and rolled a bit and put my foot back on the brake. "Hey, if I back up to the front of the mine, won't it leave my tire tracks? I think I should stay on the 2 tracks so other cars will erase my marks." "Ellis, you're overthinking this. You're making this too hard." "I don't care, Rave. I'm not going to take any chances." I stopped the car and we both got out. Rave jumped out with a flashlight he had taken out of my kitchen and shined the light on the front of the mine. "Ellis, look in the back of the car. I put a hammer back there to pry the boards off the opening." It was dark in the back of the car, but I used my hands to search around. I didn't feel anything. "Hey, Rave, are you sure the hammer's back here?" "Yes, keep looking." I climbed in on my hands and knees and started looking around for the hammer. It was weird. Clarice was dead, and I was feeling more and more comfortable about being around a dead person. I crawled up by Clarice's head and found the hammer. I grabbed the hammer and it was slippery. I hand and nailed my way back out of the car and said to Rave, "Let me see that flashlight. Shine it on the hammer." "Blood!" "Rave, I found us up by Clarice's head and it has blood on it." "No big deal, Ellis. We'll just leave it here with her." "Come on, Ellis, let's get this done." Rave started prying boards off the mine, opening up until there was enough room for us to walk through with Clarice. "All right, let's get her, Ellis." We walked to the back of the car and grabbed the blanket, pulling her toward the back of the car. Once she was close enough, Rave grabbed her hands, and I grabbed toward her feet. 1, 2, 3, lift! We carried Clarice in the mine and found a good place to lay her down on the ground. I don't know if it had anything to do with adrenaline, but she felt so much lighter. Maybe because her body was starting to stiffen up. I laid the blanket over her, and I started to feel sick to my stomach. The nerves or something. I had never been in trouble before, and this was so final. "Come on, Ellis. Let's board this thing up and get the hell out of here." "Don't you think we should say something, Rave?" "No, I don't. You're not a priest, and in fact, you're not even religious." The way Rave said that, it struck me funny because he sounded so angry. "Okay, you're right, Rave, let's go." We finished boarding up the mine and jumped back into the car. We drove down the hill and I almost don't remember any of it. I just kept seeing Clarice's face looking back at me with that blank stare. Rave turns to me and says, "Ellis, you did the right thing. I mean, what else could you do?" Everything to me seemed wrong, but I did feel like I had to do it this way. Plus, Rave was encouraging me, and he had a clearer mind than I did. The father butted in, "Son, if the Lord was in your heart, you would have never done something like this. You would have seen the light and called the authorities and turned it over to them." "Father, I'm hearing you on the Lord thing, but you're crazy about this turning this over to the police and the court system. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't live anywhere else but in America because I'm free. Well, I'm not exactly free anymore. Unfortunately, our justice system hasn't been about truth ever. It's about how you can twist the truth or change the perspective on how the story's told. That scares the heck out of me. Lawyer is way too close to liar for me, Father. If you have money, you can get yourself off, and in some cases, clearly, you have committed a crime. Others that can't afford a good defense attorney like me have been in prison for years, and they never had anything to do with the crime. I was convicted, and they absolutely have no evidence other than the fact that they could put me at the scene of the crimes. What about answering the most important questions that, according to our laws, must be answered? Who, what, why, where, when, and how? They can't show how I did it, when I did it, where I did it, why I did it, even if I did it. Only who they think committed these crimes because they have nothing else. No one even asks these questions. Father, what about innocent until proven guilty? This is simply an incarceration on emotion. They put me in prison to protect their little game. When a policeman's daughter and the star jock from school are murdered, someone's going to hang for it. I was guilty before this charade ever started, all based on circumstantial evidence. I was even more appalled at the community and the lynch 'em attitude they had toward me. They were screaming killer at me on the news and all sorts of things. And the truth is, I didn't do any of this except hide her body because I was scared, and they don't even know about her. When I think back on Clarice, as sick as it is, I think in a weird way, I did the right thing. Father, they will take my life because that is what they want. They are the ones that should be asking for forgiveness for putting an innocent man to death, not me. Well, son, let's hear the rest of the story. The Lord always knows the truth. From that, they or you cannot hide from. After Rave and I put Clarice in the mine, we drove back to my house and began to clean up. It was awful to look at the kitchen floor and see the blood stain. When I looked at the floor, I could see Clarice looking up at me in my mind. I think it bothered me even more that I didn't have any answers as to how this could happen. Rave came in from the garage with a pail of hot water and asked where we keep the bleach. In the laundry room, I replied. I'll get it, said Rave. Rave, what do we need bleach for? Well, Ellis, it'll clean the blood stains and it'll make it undetectable. How do you know that, Rave? Well, I was always into those spy magazines and murder mysteries, and they talk about that sort of thing. We got down on our hands and knees and scrubbed the stains on the floor. It looked almost new again. I dumped a bucket of water down the laundry room sink and thought, geez, this kid knows nothing about sex, but knows how to dispose of a murder scene? Rave walked into the laundry room. Ellis, I have to leave. I told my parents I'd be home by midnight. Reluctantly, I said, okay, I'll see you later. Suddenly, with Rave gone, everything felt a bit different. I felt scared and alone, and remorse for Clarice lying in that cold mine. It suddenly felt so real. What would I tell my friends if I told them anything? I sat in the chair in the living room with the single table lamp on and reflected on how my life has changed in a single minute. I knew as a kid you think nothing can get to you, nor can anything take you down. I knew I was in big trouble, and that I was probably the only one that was going to be able to help me.